And now for something completely different.
Hi, my name is Annie Grossman, and I'm a dog trainer. This podcast is brought to you by School for the Dogs, a Manhattan-based facility I own and operate along with some of the city's finest dog trainers. During this podcast, we'll be answering your questions, geeking out on animal behavior, discussing pet trends, and interviewing industry experts. Welcome to School for the Dogs podcast. Hey everyone, thank you as always for listening. If you're a dog lover in New York City, or maybe even if you're not in New York City, you may have heard that the Museum of the Dog has just opened after spending many years in St. Louis. It is now located in Manhattan on 41st and Park. And I am actually going to be at the museum this Saturday, March 30th, from 1 to 2, doing a training demonstration. So if you're around, please come on by. It is free. Sadly, it is not open to dogs, but my dog will be there doing a demo. And today, I have the pleasure of speaking with the museum's executive director. Alan, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
My name is Alan Fausel. I'm the executive director of the AKC Museum of the Dog, which has just been moved from St. Louis to New York.
And were you the director also in St. Louis?
No, I was not. I had an association with the AKC for years when I was doing auction houses Doyle and Bonhams in New York, and we always had them as one of our charity benefactors for the Humane Fund. So I knew the people in the collection and actually praised the collection.
What did you think of the collection then when you first saw it?
I've known it for years, and there's some really great things here. And I also went out to St. Louis twice before I took the job over the years. There's some fabulous paintings here, and also a lot of interesting other teachable things that we have from besides paintings and sculptures, but there's also collars and trophies and a whole variety of things we call Dogiana.
Dogiana, I love it. So tell me about how the museum first got started.
Well, it got started in the early 80s. So a number of people from the AKC and the and dog lovers formed a foundation because they didn't like the fact that Geraldine Rockefeller Dodge's collection in the 70s had sort of been dispersed. They thought they wanted to retain some of this.
But I don't know about her collection. What was her collection?
It was several thousand pieces, and but she was a huge. She was behind the Morris and Essex dog show, and was probably the preeminent dog person in the United States.
And she was an art collector and a dog lover, I'm guessing?
Yep, a dog breeder, yep. And she had hundreds of dogs at any one time.
What kind of... She was a Rockefeller?
Yeah, Geraldine Rockefeller Dodge.
And what kind of dogs did she breed?
German Shepherds were one of the main ones, and also I think there were some Bedlingtons in there, and the Cocker Spaniel. She was sort of instrumental in the development of the American Cocker Spaniel as opposed to the English Cocker Spaniel.
So she had amassed this huge collection of art, and when she died, it got left to the AKC. Is that right?
No, this was confusing everyone. It got dispersed, and the people at the AKC said, we don't want that happening again. Let's start a museum. What I'm talking about is 5 years before this was formed, Mrs. Dodge's collection was scattered to the winds. And the people said, wow, we probably don't want to have that happen. Let's see if we can put a collection together here.
Ah, okay.
Now, there are a few pieces that have come in to us by various ways that she once owned in the Provence, but that was sort of the inspiration to say let's collect some of these things. Let's not have, start a collection. And they started it in the New York Life building, where the AKC had their headquarters upstairs. It was in the lobby of the New York Life building at 51 Madison, and was there for 5 years. And the great art dealer William Secord is one of the major U.S. dog art dealers. Was the first director.
And then it was moved from Manhattan to St. Louis, I understand, because of rent prices, I'm guessing?
There were some incentives to go out there, and they needed more space than they had in Manhattan, and they went out to St. Louis for 32 years.
So how have pieces entered this collection?
I would say almost 99% of it is donations. There are very few purchases.
And tell me about the kinds of pieces that are part of this collection that's now been around for more than 30 years, I guess, right?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of, about half of it's three-dimensional art in the form of ceramics and bronzes. That's a very big part of the collection of dogs. People collect there are a lot of ceramic dogs, and then about the other half is flat art, drawings, paintings, prints, watercolors that hang on the wall, and most of it's really geared towards the purebred dog, and the fact that most of the people involved in the AKC are involved with their own breeds.
Are there famous artists who have pieces in this collection, or household name painters or sculptors?
I don't know if there's household names per se, other than we have a William Wegman photograph. He's a famous dog photographer. In dog art world, yes, there are also names like the Earl family, George and Maud, and of course, probably the leading one is Sir Edward Henry Landseer, who's probably who was a great painter in and of himself, let alone a dog painter.
When was he working?
He was working in the 19th century, and he was Queen Victoria's favorite. And in fact, that sort of ushered in the sort of the golden age of dog painters, like 1840 to about 1940. And because of Queen Victoria, people wanted to be like her, and she had, at any one time about 75 dogs, and she sponsored and commissioned a lot of dog art.
That was kind of when breeding got started, at least in America, isn't it?
Well, even there, in England, the first written confirmations were like 1851, and the Kennel Club there starts a little before us, I think 1873 or 4, and so it's all gaining momentum at that point.
I've heard, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that a lot of conformation breeding started because of people sort of wanting to be like royalty, who had these fancy dogs, and if you could get your hands on a couple of dogs like they had, you too could create your own population. Well,
they wanted to. It became much more. It's sort of kind of an English thing of categorization. It was and delineating things. The famous scientist Linnaeus. So we talked about that, and how you describe each species and each of these breeds. So there's this they want to have some conformity, so you know what you were getting. So they started to breed, dogs for certain. They're purpose bred. These dogs would be better for hunting. These dogs would be better for going after badgers. These dogs would be better for herding sheep. They all had a job.
So tell me about the move of the museum from St. Louis to New York City. I understand it just opened a couple of weeks ago.
We opened officially on February 8th, and we started. Construction started about a year and a half ago, and we've now done very, very well. It has paid off. We are going to have. We doubled St. Louis's attendance and revenue in 16 days.
You mean the revenue for a year?
For a year.
Oh, wow.
We doubled it.
Well, what brought about the move from St. Louis?
That, in a sense, the the fact that in St. Louis it was a nice building and complex, and they did a good job, but they weren't getting the people in there. They just were outside of St. Louis. They were about 25 miles outside of St. Louis proper, and in a nice suburb, but there was just no wasn't a whole lot of
foot traffic.
Yeah, foot traffic or people coming through. Yeah, even the local people didn't know much about it.
Oh wow! Huh. Now it's in the same building as the AKC. Is that right?
Which is where it had been before. Yeah, we're bringing it back. Which is there's an advantage to that. One is that my first show, which we have for the love of all things dog, is a highlights of the two collections. People don't realize there's two separate collections. The AKC collection, which is normally housed on the 5th floor here, and then there's the Museum of the Dog collection. So I thought for the first show we'd put our best foot forward and have highlights of both collections. The AKC collection started longer before, back in the late 19th century, shortly after they were formed. But it has it's smaller. It has about 260 works. It's very high quality, mostly paintings. The museum has about 1,700 works now.
And what is like the date range? What are some of are there modern pieces and very old pieces?
Well, as I said, yeah, there's very modern things. We have a William Wegman photograph here. We have a lovely Spanish painting that was done in the 1990s. We have people who painted things that were donated from the art show for the dog show, and that was over the last 20 years or so. They've been giving us contemporary works.
What's the criteria to get into the museum? Do you have people trying to give you their paintings?
Everyone does. Yes. So and since we moved, actually, there were so many ceramics that we had 300 bulldogs. We decided to trim the collection down, and through a process of deaccession, there's a sale of about 900 items out in St. Louis, where we left behind. We decided to sell some of the things that were duplicates. I mean, we have one particular ceramic collie where there are 9 of them. I just don't need the same thing over and over again. It costs money in New York to store and maintain those.
It seems like there are not usually art museums that are based on a topic rather than a period or a style.
Hard to think. I'm thinking about it. There are other dog museums out there. There's actually in Passau, Germany. There's a museum devoted to the Dachshund, just one breed.
As they deserve.
Yeah, there's interesting, but there are other different museums. I was listening to public radio the other day, and they were offering something where there's a guide to 110 museums in New York.
So I heard that. Yeah,
you don't even know about.
Were you included in that?
I'm not sure because it probably hadn't. It probably was published before we got out there. But they did mention it when they ran a piece on us.
What kind of people are coming to the museum?
Well, it's mixed. We have we've had 3 events with our AKC people, and we had a major brunch, and so those were more of the donors and the people in the dog fancy who breed and own and are really the hardcore groups. And then what I found is that the museum works very well because it's a great collection, but it also has a cutting edge, about 7 cutting edge interactive digital displays, and people congregate to different ones, and then they go back to the collection. We have Find Your Match, which has been the most popular, where you don't find your match as kind of lifestyle, but it takes a picture of you and then uses some visual identification and matches you with what the dog look like.
Right, I saw that. Now I have to ask what you got.
I generally get Boston Terrier. Sometimes I change it, or a Bulldog, but it's fairly consistent. And that's the millennials love it because they can email these things, and it goes on to social media, and then it's just you hear the howls and screams of laughter from that. And then there, on the first level, we also have our Meet the Breeds table, which I call the heart and soul of the operation. Is that we have a interactive flat screen table where you get 4 different people working on it, and you watch your dog come across or your breed come across the screen and pull it down into the doghouse, and you're given about 6 or 8 different qualities. What they look like, their appearance, their origin, their past, their future, or their present, a fun fact, and what we have in the gallery. And it's this chock full of information, which was being here in the AKC, I was able to rely on their expertise to fill that with content for all 193 AKC accepted breeds. Then upstairs we have a train your dog, where we took a Labrador Retriever puppy, a 6 months old lab, and put her in a motion capture suit, and had her go through the tricks, and it's set up so that the 7-foot screen responds to your hand gestures and your voice to train the dog to do sit, speak, spin, down, come,
Very
stay.
cute. Yeah, very cute.
So it's and the little kids love that. You hear them screaming. Her name is Molly, and they're screaming Molly all the time. And we have a community board, and we also have a board, an interactive board with about breeders, and tells the story of breeders of the AKC. And what was really probably the most I'm proud of, and actually sort of happy about is our library. We have 4,000 volumes of more general books from our 15,000 volume AKC library.
It's an amazing library. I felt like, okay, now I know where I can leave my books when I go. Where did all those books come from?
Oh, over the years, it's part of the AKC library, and we put some rarities out there in the cases from upstairs, and then we have the general books for people to use.
I mean,
we have an activity table where people can draw and do puzzles, and school groups can come through, and we post that on our community board.
You have some really nice ways to engage people. The library is amazing in the kind of niche books that are there. There's a whole section on just naming your dog.
Yep.
And within that, I found like a book on naming your dog with Gaelic translations of regular names or something like that.
It's very funny that you mentioned that. I had a reporter in one Saturday and was asking about this book, which about Irish names.
Oh, really?
So let me go over here. That he knew as a child. He was about 35, 40 years. And there it was. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that.
Do you have any favorite pieces in the museum?
Well, I think the crowd favorite is The Silent Sorrow by Maud Earle, which shows Edward VII's dog, Caesar, who he was very attached to, and Edward VII, being the son of Queen Victoria, inherited her love of dogs. And it shows, and it was so important that when Edward VII died, Caesar was included in the funeral cortege. And this shows Maud Earle, in a brilliant stroke, shows Caesar resting his head on his departed master's armchair. And the armchair itself is sort of faintly drawn, and as it goes up higher, it sort of blends into the background and fades, much like the memory. It's just very touching. People love it. And it shows Earle's inventiveness, which we will be featuring this summer. I have about 80 works by Maud Earle and 40 works by Marguerite Kermsey and other women artists of the early 20th century. So we're doing a show. Our next show will be in July of women in dog art in the early 20th century.
You've mentioned her a couple times. Who was Maud Earle?
Maud Earle was the daughter of George Earle and the nephew or the niece of Thomas Earle, and the half sister of Percy Earle. So she came from a dog painting family, but George is very accomplished. George and Thomas are very accomplished, but she put out a fairly large body of work. And you were mentioning that in my sort of immodestly that we're in my press release that her career is being reassessed, and that's a lot because I am. It's like I'm since the last year I'm going, oh my gosh, what's this woman doing? Oh, she's doing this. Oh, and how she differs from other artists at the time, other male artists like Wardle or McGarry or other things like that.
Well, when was she painting, and was she British?
She was she's British. She was from 1864 to 1943, and
1864.
Yeah. And in 1915, she moved to America, actually, and painted a lot of dogs here.
Are you in touch with what's going on with the modern world of dog painting? Is there a modern world of dog painting? Or are there big collectors?
Yeah, the modern world is, like I say, with anything in the art world, it's hard to distinguish quality except by time. Time sort of reveals truth, and so it's easy to see that from a distance. But we do have other people. There's some very good artists. I said that we have a Wegman. We have a couple of Christine Merrill paintings. She's a great dog portraitist. We have her portrait of Millie, the bush dog. And there's others, and we just sort of have to we try to be selective and see what the trends are. We'll probably have some shows up in the future with contemporary artists and photographers.
What's the highest valued piece of work that you have in the museum?
We try to. I'm not really supposed to talk about value with my attorneys there, but I would. It's not that expensive. The most expensive works, I came from the auction world, would sell from anywhere between $200,000 and $400,000, something like that in today's auction world. So it's not a huge amount of money.
Oh, but you can't tell me which painting?
Probably not.
I liked the porcelain Great Danes. Seemed like if you were going to have a Great Dane, a porcelain one might be the way to go.
Well, we have a bunch of those, and we probably have some for sale in the 23rd in St. Louis in April.
Was that kind of like a trend to get large porcelain life-size versions of different breeds? Because it seemed like you had a few of them.
It depended on the donor. As I said, you'll see a lot of mastiffs because Marie Moore gave us 300 mastiffs and paintings, and one by the name of Cohn gave us over 300 bulldogs, and Nancy Carroll Draper gave us at least 150 Great Danes. So that's where that collection is heavy. And so in moving this here, I said, well, this is kind of top heavy. Much like a dog show, you wouldn't want to have 800 labs and
right.
Just a few.
So when is the St. Louis auction? I'm curious about this.
April 23rd. Yeah, well, it's really the redundancies and the things that out of the quality you think we would want here. Things like I have 2 dog sleds, and one's in storage. I'm going to hang it someplace here, but the other one I don't need. So I get 1 dog sled's enough. And as I said, the collies, the Ashton Applause by Royal Dalton, the collector who gave us a really good collection of porcelains, was a collie person. He had 15 of them, so we're selling 9 of them.
And this is in.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing over and over again. So there's no reason for us to spend. I worked it out, in storage fees and handling. It'd be $50 a year for each one piece of porcelain.
And this sale's happening in St. Louis in April or March?
April 23rd.
April 23rd. Well, we'll have to include information about that, and if anyone wants to go to St. Louis to get their own.
Or they do it online. It's Leslie Hindman. It's an auction house I've known for years.
Oh, interesting. Tell me about the skeleton that you have.
Belgrave Joe is the mascot of the library. He sort of always lived there. He's always moved down here from the from upstairs. He belongs to the AKC. But Belgrade was a very important fox terrier. They said before Joe there were terriers that chased foxes, and then after them there were fox terriers. He sort of was a fundamental, seminal producer in the breed who helped steer the direction of the breed. He lived for 20 years and had a lot of offspring, and they said his blood ran through almost half the fox terriers, smooth end wire, for dozens of years. And in fact, we have a painting downstairs of Nornay Sadler, who's a 25th generation removed fox terrier that won something like 71 best in shows back in the late 30s.
Interesting.
But what's interesting about them, we're using them as a teaching tool. So we just got them photographed. They're going through the 3D animation. We're going to have them 3D printed for a teaching tool.
You're going to have the skeleton 3D printed?
Yep.
Wow. Do you have any other future interesting shows that we should know about?
We've had there's always a lot of interest in the service dogs and the war dogs. We have 2 war dogs already, Always Faithful and Smokey, who were World War II dogs, cast in bronze here. And this Memorial Day, we're going to be honoring them, as well as the Fleet Week. We'll have a sea dog here, and but also another sculpture from Susan Bahari of Stubby, who was a World War I dog. So we'll have them all here, and give a salute to them over the Memorial Day weekend.
Cool. Well, I'm going to be there on March 30th doing a little training demo, Dog Training 101, we call it. And if you're open to it, I have a couple suggestions for shows that I think you guys could host in the future.
Well, we have a list, but we'll talk about it, sure.
I think you could do one of illustrations, great illustrations of dogs. My father was an illustrator, which is why I'm interested in that. But I saw you did have some beautiful old posters of like movie posters.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't have enough for that, but I have something somewhat along that line, but very different thing. Is this? I have a collection of vernacular photography, which is becoming very popular these days in the collecting world, of just everyday pictures. And there's a woman who collected it from the back, since the 70s. She would just go to estate sales and buy the old photo albums or get the dog pictures out of people's photo albums going back to the late 19th century. And so I wanted to do it because it's how people see their dogs, and how people, and how they were seen in those days, and what you would record with the photographs. Now, and it's so different from what we have today, because people just snap billions of images. Then, and the reason I call it it's photos please do not bend, because if you talk to anyone over 70, they write that on their if they're sending photographs, they write that on their envelope, because when I grew up, photographs took a long time to get back. You had to go to the lab. And the present generation doesn't even understand 1-hour photos, let alone 2-week photos. And they're thought as precious objects, and they want to make sure that they didn't get bent in the mail. So it's taking a little different look at how people, interacted, lived with their dogs, and what they chose to record.
I love that. That sounds really exciting. I'd love to see that. My other idea for you is to do a show of art by dogs.
Yeah, hard to say. I don't know if that'd be an entire show, but I think before that, I'd probably do a show with dog artists, who are contemporary ones. I think we want to keep the art going, and there's some people will have in for demonstrations. We're going to have drawing classes.
Yeah.
So with as one of my colleagues says, we'll actually have live nude models.
Sounds like a good note to end on. Fun dog fact of the day, Millie Bush, the English Springer Spaniel who belonged to Barbara Bush and President George H.W. Bush. Her painting is in the museum, but my fact is that she appeared, or was portrayed, I should say, on 4 different sitcoms in the 90s. Murphy Brown, Wings, Who's the Boss, and The Simpsons. And our woof shout out today goes to my dog Amos, who turns 14 next month. This Saturday, March 30th, from 1 to 2, he and I will be at the museum doing a training demonstration. So please come on by. And later this week, we will also be doing a walkthrough of the museum on Instagram. So make sure you follow us at School for the Dogs. Thanks so much for listening. You can support School for the Dogs podcast by telling your friends about it, leaving a review, or shopping in our online store. You can learn more about us and sign up to get lots of free training resources when you visit us online at schoolforthedogs.com.